Good afternoon. My name is Tyson Langhoffer, and I'm an attorney with Alliance Defending Freedom. Specifically, I'm the director of ADF's Center for Academic Freedom, where we defend the freedom of speech and association of students and faculty so that everyone can freely participate in the marketplace of ideas on campus without fear of government censorship. Marketplace of ideas sounds like a great concept, right? The Supreme Court has repeatedly referred to our colleges and universities as marketplaces of ideas. In other words, at universities, you'll be exposed to all different kinds of worldviews and philosophies and ideas, and then you get to choose which you believe is true or correct. Almost every college has some statement on their website discussing how they're going to provide you a first-class education and expose you to different ideas. For example, here's what Queens College in New York says on its website. Queens College offers a rigorous education in liberal arts and sciences under the guidance of a faculty dedicated to both teaching and research. Students graduate with the ability to think critically, address complex problems, explore various cultures, and use modern technologies and information resources. Located in a residential area of Queens, America's most ethnically diverse county, the college has students from more than 150 different countries, and it offers a first-rate education to talented people of all backgrounds and financial means. Sounds great, right? Sounds inspiring. I'm sure that you all have looked at a bunch of different colleges and their websites, and you've considered or that you're considering or that you've chosen to attend. I'm sure you've heard speakers at your graduation ceremonies or your teachers or parents or friends, and they're going to tell you that you can be anything you want to be and explore your dreams. After reading these websites and hearing these speeches, you probably feel inspired and ready to take on the world. You probably feel like this guy.
We chose Georgia Tech because we want to do the impossible. And this school is equipped with the resources and faculty to help us do just that. And so, in the words of Sir Isaac Newton, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Georgia Tech is proud of its many traditions, but the one I find most exciting is our tradition of excellence. Our mission as students is not to follow in the footsteps of the astronauts, Nobel Prize laureates, and presidents who graduated before us, but to exceed their footsteps, crush the shoulders of the giants upon whom we stand. We here are all such innovative people, so I am telling you, if you want to change the world, you're at Georgia Tech. You can do that. If you want to build the Iron Man suit, you're at Georgia Tech. You can do that. If you want to play theme music during your convocation speech like a bad, we're at Georgia Tech. We can do that. I am doing that.
So after hearing something like this, you might think, that's so awesome. I can change the world. And my school wants to help equip me to change the world. So you're all excited to begin your education. You arrive on campus and you're told that you must attend diversity training. You're thinking, diversity, I'm cool with that. I like diversity. Diversity is good. Then the instructor starts talking about gender identity. And he explains that gender identity is different than biological sex, and that sometimes the two don't match. Just because someone is born a biological male doesn't mean that that is his gender identity. And his gender identity may be male, it may be female, it may be both at the same time, or it may be neither. And you'll be told that you must refer to that person according to that person in a pronoun according to that person's choosing. In other words, you'll be told that you must call a he a she or vice versa. So you think back to the statements that the university talked about and on its website and how it wants you to teach you to think critically and how important it is to explore all different kinds of ideas and different perspectives. So you raise your hand and say, I'm not sure that I agree. I mean, I believe that God created humans as male and female, and that there are no other choices, and that your biological sex does not change just based upon your feelings. I feel like if I'm forced to call a female a male, that I'd be speaking something that is untrue. And I'll address everyone with respect, but I just don't think I should be forced to speak something that's untrue. Now, what would the response be? Now, my experience has been that instead of someone giving you an inspirational speech about how they think that's an interesting perspective and let's engage in dialogue, you'll likely see this type of reaction. Now, in this video, there's a girl, very angry, screaming, shaking her hands up and down, talking about how you cannot bring your hate speech to campus. So, although this is a rather amusing video, it's also very sad. And unfortunately, it's a very typical response to different ideas. Today's universities are in really bad shape. When we get to know them, they're not what they seem from the outside. We think they're marketplaces of ideas and bastions of free speech. In reality, they're remarkably closed to ideas outside of the mainstream orthodoxy. A perfect example is the rise of trigger warnings. Trigger warnings on campus, they're a warning given out to students prior to studying something that somebody might think is controversial. And they've been given out for something as innocuous as the studying of Mark Twain's Huck Finn, because Huck Finn uses some racial language that's not appropriate and acceptable in today's society. So the mood on most college campuses is that if you're offended by something someone else says or does, then you shouldn't have to be exposed to it. In my daily work, I hear stories like this all the time. I hear about conservative and Christian students and faculty being completely harassed and shouted down simply for speaking their views on campus and bringing a different perspective. Remember Queens College, the quote I gave from that, and all that feel-good kind of mumbo-jumbo about how they want you to think critically and be exposed to different ideas and explore complex problems? Yeah, that might be true for positions that are socially acceptable on campus. But if you want to examine important social issues such as abortion, immigration, same-sex marriage, or gender ideology, from a Christian worldviews, those views aren't welcome. I'll tell you a little bit more about one of our clients that encountered this problem at Queens College in this presentation later on. But that's where we at ADF come in. We exist to protect your First Amendment rights at public universities. It's my privilege to work with students like you every day, helping you as you seek to advocate and defend a Christian worldview on our public university campuses. So I've got 4 goals for today. First, I want to inform you of your rights on campus by looking at some of the most common threats to those First Amendment freedoms. If you're attending a public university, I would encourage you to get involved and find some community of other Christians that would encourage you in your walk and not drag you down. And if you can get involved in one of those fellowships, most likely that fellowship, that group, is going to try to share its Christian worldview in some capacity. And typically when they're trying to do that, you're advocating for your worldview in a certain way. You might be holding an event, advertising an event, or funding an event. In each of these endeavors, there are things that universities do to try to stymie your efforts. Today we're going to identify those roadblocks and what you can do to eliminate them. And by the way, eliminating these roadblocks will benefit all students, not just Christian students, not just conservative students, not just liberal students, all students. And I'll kind of give you a good retort when next time somebody accuses you of being a closed-minded Christian bigot. So the second thing I want to do is I want to inspire you with other stories of other students who have faced similar obstacles on their campus and to show how they've beaten them back. President James Garfield said, "The men who succeed best in public life are those who take the risk of standing by their own convictions." The third thing I want to do is I want to challenge you to look out for these roadblocks on campus. And if they confront you, I want you to be willing to take a stand and eliminate them. Patrick Henry said it this way: "Those who expect to reap the blessing of freedom must undertake to support it." In other words, if your freedom's taken away, take some action to win it back and secure it for you and for the next generation. Finally, I want to provide some general legal recommendations for engaging in campus activism. Now, before we move on to that, I want to talk first for a minute about private universities. Everything I'm going to be talking about today really applies to public university settings. The First Amendment protects private universities just like it protects your individual rights to speak. So because the Constitution and the First Amendment only restrict what the government can do, they do not limit the sorts of rules and regulations that private universities may impose on their students. In fact, the First Amendment operates to protect the rights of private universities to enact the rules and regulations that comply with their worldview. Now, this is a good thing because it actually allows religious universities to implement religiously based standards that would not be allowed at public universities. But this means that students at private universities don't have the same rights as students at public universities. So what can students at private universities do if you feel like you're being treated unfairly or your voice is being shut down? There's several different things. One is that in some states there are actually laws that protect your rights at private universities just like public universities. California has a law called the Leonard Law, and it actually applies to secular private universities and essentially applies the First Amendment rules to secular university or to private universities as well. But you can use policy arguments if you want, to the administration and say, hey, why should we at private universities have fewer rights than the students at public universities? You can use the power of publicity. Supreme Court Justice Brandeis said that sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if you think that something wrong is going on, you can go viral, go into social media and talk about things that are going wrong and use some public pressure there. And you can also use the university's policy manual against it. Many private universities claim that they support and protect academic freedom and freedom of speech. And some courts have held that a policy manual is actually a contract between the student and the university. So if the student feels that its rights are being violated under the contract, then you can use that as an argument. Or you can just go to the alumni. If you know some powerful alumni and say, hey, I think this is an unfair policy at the private university. Can you help me change it? So those are some things that apply to private universities. But everything I say from here on out is going to be public universities. Here's a hypothetical that you are likely to encounter as a student. So your group hosts a speaker to discuss gender identity and transgenderism from a biblical standpoint. Administrators notify the group afterward that the college is starting an investigation because some students were offended by the event. Administrators request a meeting with the group's president, and you find out that the college actually has a policy which prohibits the creation of an offensive environment. The penalty for violating the policy is derecognition of the student group. So the question is that constitutional? The answer is no. The college can investigate problems on campus, and they've got a duty to protect students because it has a duty to keep them safe. But the policy we're talking about, the creation of an offensive environment, that's a content-based restriction, and that's unconstitutional. In other words, they're determining based upon the content of your speech whether it's going to be allowed or not. And you cannot be punished for someone else being offended by your speech. That's unconstitutional. There are a number of cases, Texas versus Johnson, which is a flag-burning case. Now, I love America. I think it's a great country. I think it's the greatest country that's ever been in the history of the world. But the problem is, I can't tell others that they can't burn the flag. I may be offended by that, but I can't. That's a method of speaking that they're protesting that, and they have the right to do that, even if it offends me. So let's move on to the final topic of one of the policies that are most common, and that's security fees. So here's the hypothetical. Your student group decides to host a debate on free speech on college campuses. After reserving the room and posting announcements about the event, other students start to protest. The college decides that the student group must have campus police attend the event because the event has, quote, stirred up the student body. So after the event, the college sends the student group a bill for $1,000 for the police officers. So the question is, can the college do this? The answer is no. A requiring a student group to pay security fee because other students are mad or offended or they're going to protest is called a heckler's veto. Essentially, they're allowing the hecklers, the people that don't like your speech, to determine whether you can speak or not, because many and most student groups that I know, that I represent, couldn't afford the $1,000 to pay for that security. Therefore, they're not going to be able to speak. So essentially, a security fee like that is a tax on speech. Now, colleges can require student groups to pay security, but that is only if it is if they don't have unbridled discretion and if it applies to all groups. So in other words, the college could say, if you have an event that has more than 150 people, every event has to pay for security that has more than 150 people. They could do that because it applies across the board. But they can't say to you, hey, you know what, your speech is considered offensive to a lot of the faculty and students, therefore we're going to require you to pay security. So this is actually, again, like the other examples, a real-life example. I represented Young Americans for Freedom and Ben Shapiro versus Cal State LA several years ago. So YAF, Young Americans for Freedom, brought Ben to speak on campus about the problem with free speech on campus. Seems pretty non-controversial in my mind, all right? It wasn't political. It was just saying, look, there's a problem with people protesting other people's speech. The university threw up all kinds of roadblocks. First of all, they said, we're canceling the speech. Knowing Ben, if you've heard Ben speak, he said, yeah, I'm coming anyways. So he comes, and they're like, okay, well, you're going to pay security for that. We sent him a letter. They said, okay, we won't require you to pay security. Then the faculty and the students decided to flood the student union and block the front doors so nobody could go in. When the student group found out about back doors, they started slipping in kids in the back door, and the protesters found out about that and blocked the back doors. Now, the university had 24 police officers on campus at that time. They normally only have 4. The police officers stood by and did nothing to break up these unlawful actions. I had pictures of professors linking arms in front of the doors, blocking students from coming in that wanted to hear Ben speak. Thankfully, Yaf and Ben retained us. We filed a lawsuit, and we were able to change that policy. So now students at Cal State LA have the freedom to bring speakers to campus. And in fact, that YAF group is now one of the fastest growing and largest YAF groups in the nation because they stood their ground and they were willing to challenge that unconstitutional policy. Now, I said at the beginning there was kind of 4 different policies that and these examples I've given you. But when you're at college universities, sometimes there's just examples that defy any real classification. And that's the case with Bernadette Tazy's situation. Bernadette's a student at Fresno State University, and she's the president of Students for Life. Bernadette, her group received permission to chalk messages on sidewalks on campus. And these were very life-affirming messages like, hey, if you find yourself pregnant, there's resources for you. Call this number. We're here to help, those types of things. And but if you we'll watch this video and see what happens after Bernadette and her group chalked these messages on campus.
Excuse me, we have permission for all of this?
No, you don't.
We do actually have the email, and you can call student involvement. From Plan Ops and student involvement, yes.
All right, then
We do. Yes, I am.
That's perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of free speech is that we have a free speech area here on campus.
But we have permission for all of this.
Free speech is free speech in the free speech area. It's a pretty simple concept. Okay? This does not constitute a free speech area. Okay?
Okay, but we have permission.
If you have permission, then I will verify that you have permission.
Please do, and then please tell your students to stop until you verify that.
Isn't that part of what are my students doing that is not part of free speech?
They told you that they're wiping out what we have permission for.
You see them wiping it out?
Yes, I did. I actually have video of it.
Okay, here, let me show you.
You didn't have permission to record. I don't want to be recorded.
You have permission to put it down.
Yes, we do.
I have permission to get rid of it.
Good to know.
This is our part of free speech. Do you disagree with our part of free speech?
Absolutely, I disagree.
Really?
And you disagree with mine too.
No, I don't. If you would have written this over there, I am perfectly fine with you doing it. I am perfectly fine with you having a free speech in a free speech area.
But you're exercising your free speech in a non-free speech area.
College campuses are not free speech areas. You understand? Obviously, you don't understand.
So that was Professor Gregory Thatcher. He recruited students in his class to help him erase the Students for Life messages. Contrary to Professor Thatcher's belief, college campuses are, in fact, free speech areas. Accordingly, we filed a lawsuit on behalf of Bernadette and her Students for Life group against Professor Thatcher, and we reached a settlement with him recently. And Professor Thatcher agreed to an injunction prohibiting him from ever enforcing or ever stopping the Students for Life messages again. And he agreed to pay $2,000 in damages and $15,000 in attorney's fees. But you haven't heard my favorite part of the settlement. Professor Thatcher actually had to undergo First Amendment training from one of our attorneys for 2 hours. Now, apparently, Professor Thatcher was belligerent to the end. In fact, during the first training, he left after 10 minutes. He was so angry. And we had to engage in some more negotiations, and he had to pay some more attorney's fees for the time spent during that time period. We finally got the training completed. I don't know that it helped Professor Thatcher at all, but it was kind of fun. So I'm going to give you some general advice for strategic, effective activism on campus. If you're going to have an event you think might be protest or might be controversial, what I want you to do is make sure that you write down what happened at the event and encourage your student club members to do that. If you have a problem either before or after, go ahead and call ADF. That's why we're here. We're here to help you. If the university calls you to a meeting, go ahead and go, even though it's a little bit scary. You can call us first and we can walk you through it, but bring witnesses. Never go to a meeting with administration with just one person. It always helps to have two. It's even biblical, right? When there's two people and I know in Jewish law it also required 2 witnesses for you to have a conviction. And so, again, there's truth where there's more than 2 people. Fifth, if you can, try to tape record the meeting. But you need to Google your law first to decide whether your state actually allows it. Some require permission from all parties, and some actually allow you to do it one-sided. After the event or after your meeting with the university administrator, go ahead and email the university administrator and say, hey, here's my understanding of our meeting. Here's what I understand you told me to say. Please correct me if I have if my understanding is incorrect. And that will help, again, document that so that later on you'll remember what happened and they won't be able to contradict that or they'll have a more difficult time. The final thing is, if you're going to challenge a policy or if you think that you're going to have a problem with the policy, go ahead and get us involved early. That's why we're here. That's what I do every day. I love advising students to help them assert their rights on campus and make sure that they're not being treated differently because of their ideas. The other way you can do it is there's things called the Freedom of Information laws, and almost all states have those. And those laws basically give you the right to obtain information from your university. And so basically you can figure out whether they've funded other events like yours and if they're telling you the truth about that. Finally, don't get arrested, all right? I know it might help your street cred and all, and like you can get a prison tat and all that stuff, but it doesn't really help your case, all right? I can challenge that. If they ask you to leave, go ahead and comply with that. There's no need to get arrested in order for me to be able to challenge that policy. But what I want you to do is, I do want you to take a stand and change some policies on campus. If you want to make a long-lasting change to your campus, bring a challenge to some unconstitutional policies. The college Republicans did that, and they were able to change that for all 25 campuses. For 500,000 students now have more freedom because of that. Ronald Reagan said, we must pay a price for freedom, but whatever the price, it's only half the cost of doing without it. He also said, freedom is never more than 1 generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in our bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free. So now that you know a little bit more about your rights on campus, I just want you to know that ADF has your back. That's why we're here. We're here to represent you and to help you. And so we want you to know that we're here for you, and you can contact us if you ever run into any problem. Never think to yourself that this is not a big enough problem to bother ADF with, or this is not important enough, because what's important is that you know your rights and you're able to support them. So we want you to know you've got a friend at ADF, and we're here to help. Now, I know you might be thinking, why should I call ADF? Aren't there other organizations that do this? There are, but why would you call those other organizations when all we do is win? So we have a couple questions from the audience. The first question is, if I'm doing an event on campus, like what type of notice should I give the university, and who do I go speak to at the university to talk about the event? Now, it's a good question. It actually has a couple parts. First of all, every university will vary on who you should talk to. Most of them will probably have a Office of Student Life, most likely, that governs the student organizations, and they'll probably say you have to go get permission before doing this. But as we're going to talk about in a segment here in a minute, most of those policies that require prior notification or prior permission actually are unconstitutional. The government can't require you to get permission before speaking in the public areas of campus. But in general, if you're going to go pre-notify, if you desire to let them know I'm going to be there because you want them to provide some security, something like that, most likely I would go to Office of Student Life first, and then they could direct you somewhere else, maybe to the security office, something like that. So the second question we have is, what do I do if I feel uncomfortable about something like a required diversity class, but obviously they're pushing an agenda? What can I do? Well, there's a couple different things you can do. First of all, if you're uncomfortable with something or you feel like maybe your rights are being violated, contact ADF. That's why we're here. We are here to protect your rights, and you can give me the facts about the situation, and then I can answer your questions, and I can tell you, yeah, they probably have the right to do that, or I might say, hey, no, they don't have the right to do that. Here's your options for trying to push back on that. If you go to adflegal.org, adflegal.org, that has all of our cases on it, that both the Center for Academic Freedom and our other cases. You can sign up there and you'll get information about all of our cases. But we also have a Center for Academic Freedom.org, Center for Academic Freedom.org, and that has all of the information about our cases specifically. And if you go to that website, and at the bottom there is an email list, and you'll get, when we release press releases and things like that, you'll hear about when we file a lawsuit or when we get a win. Just today we issued one. I was testifying in Louisiana on a free speech bill. The governor just signed that yesterday. So thankfully now all colleges in Louisiana are required to have policies which comply with the First Amendment. So that's a great win for the students of Louisiana, and you'd be able to find out information about that. I have a question from the audience. What recourse does a student have when a professor limits the use of Scripture or grades them down? That's a difficult one. There are fewer protections for students when it comes to academic freedom in the classroom, because a professor has academic freedom just like a student has academic freedom, and the professor has the authority or the ability to determine what the structure of the curriculum. So if they assign an assignment and they say, look, you can talk about anything, but you can't talk about God, and you talk about God, that's going to be a difficult road to hoe, because, again, the professor has some authority to determine what the curriculum is. But if there are general requirements, and the general requirements don't restrict something, and you write on a religious topic, and then they grade you down because of that religious topic, that would be different. Now, there's a difference between having your rights violated and then being able to prevail and win and enforce those. What you'll find in practicality is courts don't like to intervene in grading situations. It's a very difficult thing. Now, we have helped with cases where students have been kicked out of programs because of their religious views, that they're basically, their university has taken away the right to get the degree. That's a whole nother level, and we can do that.